For it is by grace you are saved through faith, not of yourselves, but it is a gift of God. Ephesians 2:8. Welcome to Grace Bond Ministries. Hey everybody, Jonathan here. You are listening to the weekly Grace Bond Ministries podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really hope you find this beneficial. This is, some of them, some of my podcasts don't take as much time to prep for, but this one took a lot of time to prep for. I really want this to be beneficial. All right. So what I'm going to talk about is something that we all need to hear. Right. Something we all need to hear, and that is we all need to hear, how do I have discussions or debates, or anything like that as a Christian, right? So honestly, this really should apply to all people, because I believe that the truths of Scripture and the things we see in Scripture and the things Jesus tells us, and the things we see Jesus do, I think all of that is universal and is objective truth and objective morality, and so I really think this should apply to everybody. But I'm specifically talking to Christians, because you have to, for this one, you have to presuppose that the Bible is the Word of God, and that what we see there is how we should act. All right, and it's people have asked this question for a while, and have really thought about it, and some people have not, though. Not everybody has thought about this, and some people don't really care about this topic of how to have actual actual Christian discussions. All right. Now, when I say Christian discussions, I'm not talking about just discussions within Christianity. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is how to be a Christian who has discussions. How to be a Christian who has discussions. And that can be anywhere from discussions with an atheist or a Muslim or a Jehovah's Witness or whatever, or it can be something, even just talking about politics. You can be a Christian and represent Christ even in the midst of talking about crazy stuff like politics, where people get really defensive and attacking and things like that. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But listen, I am super excited. I mean, y'all have no idea how excited I am that about this. All right. So August 18th, I am going to pre-record an episode or a podcast, and I'm getting the guy. His name is Dr. Michael Brown, and Dr. Brown, he actually does a similar podcast like this, and he is president of the Fire School of Ministry. And so I emailed him, reached out to him, and said, "Hey, listen, you're the reason." He really is. He's the reason that I was motivated, and he's the one that God spoke through to me to start my own podcast like this. And so, very excited to have him on the podcast and to talk with him. It's like, most people, may not even know that name, but to me, it's like meeting a celebrity, and here I get to have him on my own little podcast here. So super excited about that. So be looking forward to that. It's going to be a huge deal. I'm super excited to have him on the podcast, and just to chat with him and get to talk with him and that kind of thing. So. And actually, if you're around where I am, he's actually going to be at a church. I don't remember what the church is called. You can look it up online, but he's going to be in Brooksville, Florida this coming Sunday. So that's pretty cool that he's going to be there. But I got my own church, so I'm not going to be able to see him there. But definitely looking forward to doing that podcast with him, and just having him support me, because I've been communicating with his secretary, and they've been really good about getting with me about this. So. But I had to announce that it's going to be awesome. Now this is Saturday's podcast, and then the next podcast will be on Wednesday. In that podcast, I'm going to play my sermon. I'm going to premiere my sermon where I talked about the Lord's Supper and what my thoughts are on the Lord's Supper, and what the Lord's Supper is, what some of the difficult things about the Lord's Supper in the Corinthian passage about the Lord's Supper, and talk about some of those things. And then you'll actually hear a recording of me administering the Lord's Supper at a church I used to pastor. So looking forward to that as well, to have y'all hear that and listen to that, and hope you find that encouraging, and or hope you gain some knowledge from that. All right, so let's get back here So what the topic is at hand today, all right? So if you see me looking to the side, I'm looking at my notes because I got a lot of notes for this. Uh, so since I've really been getting into theology, so I went to college. Uh, I have a bachelor's degree in Christian studies, 4-year degree in Christian studies with a concentration in pastoral ministry, which means I took extra classes in pastoral ministry or pastoral ministry specifically. So I took those classes, but while I was in those classes, I had a few friends. We would sit around and talk theology, and we didn't always agree. And 9 times out of 10, we didn't agree on a lot of things. But I went also studied apologetics, and even got to meet some of the famous apologists like Frank Turek. I've got a funny story with him and Gary Habermas and Tim McGrew and all these guys, really cool guys. Dr. Richard Howe, he just like joined our group every time we went to the apologetics conference in New Orleans. So it's really cool. But I really dived deep into that. And when I first got into it, I was so arrogant. And I knew in my heart that the conversations I was having was not so I could win somebody to Christ. It was so I could win the argument. And now today, I really try my hardest. That's not all. I'm not perfect, but I really try my hardest to. Uh, I really try my hardest to represent Christ and to reach the person and not just win an argument. So I've discussed a variety of topics, though. I've discussed things with atheists. A lot of this has happened online, but I've discussed things with atheists. I've discussed things with other Christians who disagree with me about theology and that kind of thing. I've talked with Jews online about why they reject the Messiah and why they don't like Christianity. And I've had a lot of those conversations. And what's really cool though about having the internet and social media is that now Christians have literally unlimited potential to share the gospel with I mean every single person in the world just about is on social media and online. That's not every person, but there's a big group of people that we could reach. I mean, there's no telling that, like, I could record one podcast, and it could just go viral one day, and all of a sudden I've reached thousands. You never know. Or, sometimes you reach 10, sometimes you reach 20, sometimes you don't reach anybody in your discussions. All right. But we're going to get into that a little bit more. But there are a lot of downfalls that I have seen in Christian discussions. All right. In Christian discussions. And I want to put air quotes around Christian there because this stuff is not being a Christian. All right. This is some stuff I've seen. First thing, this is a pretty big one, is people will argue and they won't know the actual facts. All right, they won't know the actual facts. And even if they do know the actual facts, they're not either they're not able or they're not. Most of the time, I'm guessing that it's that they're not willing to present those facts and present their arguments in a Christ-like way. And this too, this is an important thing too I've seen is that a lot of people think if I've upset somebody, then that means that I have spoken the truth and that they just don't like to hear the truth. I'm sure you heard somebody say that, oh, the truth hurts. But I've heard a lot of people say that. But just because you know the truth, it doesn't mean you have to be a jerk. All right? Just because you know the truth doesn't mean you have to be a jerk. And if you're a Christian, I think you do know the truth, the way, the truth, and the life. And but you don't have to be a jerk just because you know something. And as Christians, we should follow the fruit of this. We should be showing the fruit of the Spirit. Now, the word fruit there, if you studied that before, the word fruit is singular. So it's the fruit of the Holy Spirit that's inside of us, that speaks through us, that acts through us. All right. So that this is what the fruit of the Spirit is. In Galatians chapter 5, verses 22 and 23, it says, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. The law is not against such things." So we need to be allowing the Spirit to work through us and show the fruit of the Spirit inside of us. There's a lot of people out there who are defending Christianity or having Christian discussions who don't even have the Spirit within them in the first place, which is why they are unable to show the fruit of the Spirit in their discussions. All right, so that's what we're going to discuss on this podcast. So hopefully that's kind of got your engines rolling there. All right, so let's start with this. We'll start with conversations within Christianity. So between brothers and sisters in the Lord, right? So I don't know what the number is now, but we've got hundreds of different denominations. And the reason we have so many denominations is because people disagree about a lot of things. People disagree about a lot of things, little things, big things, uh, secondary, primary things. They disagree about a lot of things. But here's some here's some topics that are discussed among Christians. These are not all of them. Don't get done watching this or hearing this and saying, well, Jonathan only listed these. How many I got here? I got five. Jonathan only listed those five, so anything above that is non-Christian discussion. No, that's not what I mean. All right, that's not what I mean. But here's a couple of them. Now these are some that I have actually been a part of and taken place, and that's why I list these. I've been a part of the Calvinist Arminian debate. If you've listened to me for any period of time or know me personally, you know I'm not only not Calvinist, I'm like anti-Calvinist because I think it's very hurtful theology. I think it can really mess with people's heads. And there's good and bad about it and all that kind of thing. But I think Arminianism has a lot better basis in Scripture and has a lot more truth to it, and is better for a lot of different things. But anyways, I've had that discussion with a bunch of people. I even started a group where it was me and my other friend Austin. Y'all know Austin. He was more open theist. I'm not sure where he's at with it now, but he was like an open theist. And then we had two Calvinists, and we just kind of went back and forth in that conversation. But I've also had talks with charismatics. I've met a lot of people. I work with a lot of people who are actually charismatic, and and charismatic is more like Pentecostal. Some people don't really use the word charismatic very often, but it's like more like the Pentecostals, the speaking in tongues, the we call them holy rollers. They feel the spirit. They feel the spirit, and then they roll around, and it's the spirit's grabbed a hold of them or whatever. I've had those kinds of conversations with people, and I've also had conversations with people from different denominations talking to um, I've talked to a few Catholics about their faith. I've talked to a few uh, Pentecostals about their faith, and Methodist, and really just a very various amount, or very Episcopalian. Had some good conversations with an Episcopalian before, and so I've had those kinds of conversations within denominations. I've also had conversations about dispensationalism, specifically specific theologies. I've had conversations about dispensationalism. If you don't know what that means, it's basically that there's different dispensations in the Bible. I'm trying to just make this part brief, but there's different dispensations in the Bible and how God related to people basically in different time periods is really what dispensationalism is. And all my dispensationalist friends out there will probably slap me for making that kind of giving that kind of definition. But there's another thing I've talked about is eschatology, and eschatology is the study of the end times. And if you've been a Christian for any amount of time, if you've heard and you talk to other Christians, you know that a lot of people disagree about eschatology. What are the end times going to hold? Are we going to be raptured before the tribulation? Are we going to be raptured in the middle of the tribulation? After the tribulation? Is there really going to be 1,000-year reign of Christ on the earth and that kind of thing? Those are conversations that Christians are having. All right. And there's other kinds of conversations along those lines, different theological conversations, old earth, young earth, and that kind of thing. There's a lot of conversations to be had there. But I've had a lot of examples in my own talks and discussions. I've had a lot of things that, that just were bad conversations. And some of these things are things that I did in the past and I've learned from over time. Some of these things are a lot of these things are things that have been done to me, and some of it was my fault, like I said, but some of it was not my fault. Some of it was just the way people thought was the right way to conversate about things. I've had people call names, and just saying basically you're an idiot for not believing what I believe. How foolish and child. Now keep in mind I'm just talking about Christian conversations, name calling among Christians. Right, the same Christians that Paul wrote about letter after letter after letter after letter, talking about you need to be unified. And what are we Christians doing now? We're name calling because we have some differences of opinion. All right. Uh, and keep in mind too that if you're talking with somebody, especially online, if you're talking with somebody and they're name calling you, don't call them names back. If one of you doesn't start acting like a Christian in the conversation, then the other one never will. So if you step up and say, I'm going to do what Christ told me to do, I'm going to act the way Christ told me to act, I'm going to be like Christ to the best of my ability. If you do that, then maybe the person you're talking to can learn a little something from you. All right. Another thing I've heard is there's a lot of debate among Christians about, are you saved or unsaved? That's something you need to really figure out and study the scriptures about, and study the scriptures uh, and figure out what the Bible says about what it takes to be saved. All right, what does it take to be saved? What can you believe? What can't you not? What can you not believe? That kind of thing. About to make yourself condemned. Can you reject the Trinity and still be saved? Um, so, though I've had a lot of people though, instead of even little things like excuse me, even little things like do you believe in old Earth, young Earth? And the old Earth, we're calling old Earth people not Christians simply because they believe the Earth is old. Um, and a lot of times, just in random conversations, I remember one time specifically with me. This was a face to face conversation I had with somebody, and I was looking at a verse that was used to defend the Trinity, and I looked at it and I said, I'm not sure that's really a Trinitarian verse there. And I don't think that's something that we should use as a defense for the Trinity. I believe in the Trinity. I just didn't believe it was this verse. And the guy said, the guy questioned whether or not I was actually saved. That's the only time I've ever been questioned to my face. Are you really a Christian? I was worried about you. You're about to go to hell. For asking questions. So be careful about calling somebody unsaved, you sinner, or whatever. Be careful of that. Now there are times though where you got to stand your ground, and you got to know that this person has rejected fundamental parts of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Uh, and I'm actually in a couple of apologetics groups on Facebook, and in a lot of those apologetics groups, they don't stick to apologetics and they talk about theology. It seems like in this one group I'm in that once a week somebody wants to argue or make somebody upset about Arminianism and Calvinism. Just wants to make somebody upset about that. And I'll talk about my own group I started here in just a second, but we do have biblical examples of this. Uh, let me just read a few verses of this. You'll have to go back. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because I don't want this podcast to go on forever. But in Acts chapter 16, they actually were having a dispute among Christians where they debated and they argued and they came up with an answer actually that they all sounds like they all tried to agree on, but didn't necessarily work out. They didn't all end up agreeing on this, and they debated it for a long time after. But in Acts chapter 16, I'm going to read a couple of verses, and you just have to go back and read the rest there. So, verse 1, it says, Paul went to Derbe and Lystra, where there was a disciple named Timothy, the son of I'm in the wrong chapter. Uh, I'm sorry. I meant Acts chapter 15. I wrote it down wrong in my notes. Acts chapter 15, verse 1. It says, Some men came from Judea and began to teach the brothers, unless you are circumcised according to the custom prescribed by Moses, you cannot be saved. So this was the dispute that they were having. And I actually recently met a guy who says that we are to follow the Old Testament law, and but not the sacrificial laws, but just the laws about the Sabbath. You are to keep the Sabbath the way it was kept in the Old Testament, somewhat, and you are to follow the food laws that were given in the Old Testament as well. Uh, so this is similar. This is a similar kind of conversation where people were saying, literally, you have to be circumcised, or you won't be saved. So people today, all of us men today that are automatically circumcised when we're born, we're lucky. We're already saved. So we all get circumcised today. So, but that was the dispute in verse 1. Now you flip down to verse 4. I want y'all to notice this verse. When they arrived at Jerusalem, so Paul and Barnabas had engaged in a conversation. They were debating about it there. Then they decided to go to the apostles and talk to the apostles about it and gather the men who were eyewitnesses of Jesus and knew Jesus' heart more than anybody else during this time. So they went back to meet them. But it says when they arrived, Paul and Barnabas at Jerusalem, they were welcomed by the church, the apostles, and the elders, and they reported all that God had done with them. So instead, because they knew there was this big debate, and it was a big reason they were going back, but instead of going back and just debating, they realized that, hey, we're brothers and sisters in Christ. We need to focus on what's important, and that's the gospel of Jesus Christ, right? That's the gospel of Jesus Christ. Now, we'll see, though, that even though the gospel is the most important thing to them, theology is also very, very important to Paul and to all the apostles and all that thing. So they sat around, they were unified, and they were excited about the Lord's work and how he was saving people all across the world and even saving the Gentiles, which is a pretty important argument for this. Verse 5, though, but some of the believers who belonged to the party of the Pharisees stood up and said, "It is necessary to circumcise them and to command them to keep the law of Moses." So here we go. We got the knuckleheads that stood up and said, uh, we need to command them to keep the law. We need to command them to keep the law. So not everybody was focused on the gospel. They were ready to debate and they were ready to argue and that kind of thing is what it seems like to me. That's kind of speculation that that there's there's no other verses that really talk about a build up or they talk more about the gospel and that kind of thing. It's just somebody sitting there and they were ready to argue and they were ready to fight about this issue, and so they wanted to go ahead and bring it up and share that with people. So verse 5, we see that not everybody was really focused on the gospel. They were more worried about arguing theology. But listen to the outcome. So now you can go back and read that. Very interesting story of how they all gathered together and decided that. But then you go over here, verse 30. So they were sent off and went down to Antioch, and after gathering the assembly, they delivered the letter. When they read it, they rejoiced because of its encouragement. Both Judas and Silas, who were also prophets themselves, encouraged the brothers and sisters and strengthened them with a long message. After spending some time there, they sent back in peace by the brothers and sisters to those who had sent them. But Paul and Barnabas, along with many others, remained in Antioch, teaching and proclaiming the word of the Lord. So you have to go back and really read what the letter said and all that earlier in the chapter. But that was the outcome, and that goes to show you the kind of positive things that can happen if we have actual Christian discussions. All right, actual Christian discussions. And I hope, especially I really have only had discussions, debatable discussions with Austin Pounds on the podcast. But I really hope and pray that when I present and when I debate people and we have discussions on this podcast, I hope that what you're seeing and what you're hearing is Christ, and we're showing that we're letting the fruit of the Spirit pour out of us. All right. So now let's move on here. Let's talk about apologetics conversations with non-Christians, and then I'm going to get into a few tips about a few tips on how to have the conversations that I've come up with. All right. First Peter 3:15. If you know anything about apologetics, you should know this verse because this is the verse that everybody uses to defend apologetics because it is the most apologetic verse in the New Testament. It says, "But in your hearts regard Christ the Lord as holy, ready at any time to give a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is within you." All right. So be ready to defend the hope that is within you. Be ready with apologetics, how to defend your faith. So we're having these conversations with non-Christians, and sometimes you have to have these conversations with Christians as well. Some Christians need to know, how do you still have hope? I'm a Christian, I love Jesus, but I have no hope. How do you still have hope? And sometimes you need apologetics to just talk with Christians. But 9 times out of 10, or a lot of times, we're going to be using apologetics to talk with non-Christians. And so let me tell you what some of these conversations are. These are conversations that you have with Jehovah's Witnesses, who are not Christians, Mormons who are not Christians, Muslims are surely not Christians. These are conversations you have with atheists, agnostics, New Agers, whatever it may be. And New Agers is like the guy from the video the other day I talked to, or responded to, or whatever. Uh, but anything really outside of the bounds of Christianity, outside of those who are saved and who are born again, those are non-Christian discussions. Um, so we do have one really interesting, uh, really interesting story from Paul. So a lot of people will say, well, you really shouldn't use philosophy, or you really shouldn't use illustrations from the world to defend the gospel. You should just preach the Bible. It says you should just preach the Bible. But that's not what Paul did in Acts 17. Paul used the imagery of the pagan worship to talk about Yahweh and to talk about Jesus Christ. So let's listen to this. All right, Acts 17, starting verse 16. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was deeply distressed when he saw that the city was full of idols. So how many of us have felt that? Walking down, reading on Facebook, watching the world around us just fall captive to all the idols that are in this world. Uh, and Paul felt that too. So he reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and with those who worship God, as well as in the marketplace every day with those who happened to be there. Some of the Epicurean and Stoic philosophers also debated with him. Some said, "What is this ignorant show off trying to say?" Others replied, "He seems to be a preacher of foreign deities because he was telling the good news about Jesus and the resurrection." They took him and brought him to the Areopagus and said, "May we learn about this new teaching you are spreading, you are presenting? Because what you say sounds strange to us, and we want to know what these things mean." Now all the Athenians and the foreigners residing there spent their time on nothing else but telling or hearing something new. Paul stood in the middle of the Areopagus and said, "People of Athens, I see that you are extremely religious in every aspect. For as I was passing through and observing the objects of your worship, I even found an altar in which was inscribed to an unknown God. Therefore, what you worship in ignorance, this I proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it, he is Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in shrines made by hands, neither is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives everyone life and breath and all things. From one man he has made every nationality to live over the whole earth, and has determined their appointed times and the boundaries of where they live. He did this so that they might seek God, and perhaps they might reach out and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as even some of your own poets have said. For we are also his offspring. Since we are God's offspring, then we should think that the divine nature is like gold or silver or stone, an image fashioned by human art and imagination. Therefore, having overlooked the times of ignorance, God now commands all people everywhere to repent, because he has set a day when he is going to judge the world in righteousness by the man he has appointed. He has provided proof of this to everyone by raising him from the dead. When they heard about the resurrection of the dead, some began to ridicule him, but others said, "We'd like to hear from you again about this." So Paul left their presence. Listen to this verse. However, verse 34, some people joined him and believed, including Dionysius the Areopagite, a woman named Damaris, and others with them. Paul used apologetics, and Paul used the world's philosophy to share the gospel of Jesus Christ. To share the gospel of Jesus Christ. So now let me talk about some of the conversations I've had with non-Christians. Uh, so in apologetics groups, I joined a couple of apologetics groups on Facebook to chat online about apologetics and to have conversations with Christians, non-Christians, Jews, Muslims, whatever it was. Um, and I joined one, and every single post. Now there's 10,000 people in this group, but every single post, somebody is being so unchristlike that is claiming to be a Christian. They're being super unchristlike and just have no respect. They won't listen. They name call, ridicule, all of that. But one thing they don't do is have genuine Christian, Christ-like discussions. They don't do that. And so what I did is I said, you know what? For first of all, I'd rather have I have a lot of people that ask me apologetics questions, and so I said, you know what would be interesting uh, is to have my own apologetics group, and I just made it and see how it did. And but in my group, if I sense that anybody is being disrespected, not that you're being disagreed with or whatever, I had somebody one time that the person was upset because she posted something, And when she was asked questions about it, she couldn't defend herself, and she was upset and felt like she was attacked. But that's not an attack. But some people will ridicule and name call and that sort of thing. And I put a stop to that in my apologetics group. It's just not allowed there, and that we need respect and we need that kind of thing. So that way, anybody, no matter what they believe, if they're atheist, agnostic, Muslim, doesn't matter. If they were to join that group, they would be respected, no matter what, because I think that's the Christ-like way to handle things. Uh, so if you would like to be a part of that apologetics group, and people can post questions and ideas and all that kind of thing, I approve all the posts. So if it's not apologetics based and you try to post something, I reject it. But uh, I post those I post questions and that kind of thing. We have a lot of discussions in that group. Very interesting discussions, and sometimes they can get heated. But everybody is to treat others with respect in that group. And if not, I'll step in and moderate that when I can. So, but if you would like to be a part of that, uh, send me an instant message. Please send an instant message. Don't just comment. I'd like to be a part of it. I need you to send me an instant message so I can keep up with it. And I will add you in that. Or you can send me an email to gracebondministries@gmail.com, whatever. And I can add you a part of that. And you can not only learn about apologetics, but be a part of a group where it is demanded that you respect and love other people when you talk to them. All right. So, in summary, though, there are many ways in which Christians have not shown the fruit of the Spirit when having either one of these types of conversations, whether it be with Christians or with non Christians. There's a lot of people who are not acting Christ like when they have those kinds of conversations. And but so let me end with I've got 8 tips that I've come up with to how to have Christ like Christian conversations. Okay, number one. Seek after Jesus. Seek after Jesus to give you the fruit of the Spirit. All right. Make sure you're speaking through the Spirit. Make sure you're like, man, and question yourself. Say, God, like he says in the Psalms, God, show me my heart, know my heart, show me any wicked ways within me and help me get rid of that. Ask yourself constantly, am I doing this because I want to win the person? Am I doing this because I think it's going to be helpful? Am I doing this because I just want to be, I want to be the guy in the big pants, whatever it is, you need to ask yourself and seek after the fruit of the Spirit. Like the Galatians passage says, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against the law is not against such things. All right. So make sure you know the fruit of the Spirit and that you're seeking after that. And if you're not showing something here, if you're not being kind, then you're like, okay, I need the Holy Spirit here to step in and help me with this. All right. The second thing, know your purpose. All right. I think there's 3 purposes for having these kinds of conversations that I've been talking about. 3 purposes. The first one is that you and hopefully the person you're talking to are just seeking truth, right? John 8:31 and 32, it says, Then Jesus said to the Jews who had believed him, If you continue in my word, you really are my disciples. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. So sometimes we have conversations because we want to know the truth. We want to know the truth. I'm big into if I believe something is not true, I'm not going to believe it. I'm not going to defend it. If I think it's not true or has weak or no evidence. Uh, so that's one of the purposes is seeking truth. Maybe you just want to know what the truth is about something. Like I'm studying right now. There was a guy that my friend sent me a video, and there's a guy who supposedly was a Messiah that came before Jesus that kind of made Jesus not look like a copycat, but look like he fit in with the rest of the supposed messiahs during the time period. And I'm interested in that to know what is the truth here. What is the truth about all this? So I'm looking into that now, just to see who is this Simon guy they're talking about from Perea, and when was he around and that sort of thing, and just see what's going on there. But I'm seeking truth in that. The second thing, discipleship, discipleship. When Christ was walking the earth with his disciples, he would oftentimes question the disciples' thinking. He would question their theology. He would question the way they dealt with people. He would question their faith. Christ really pushed people. And he didn't push people because he didn't like them. He pushed them because it helped them. Every time the disciples were pushed by Jesus Christ, they grew in that. So if you're doing something that's not for the edification or the growth of someone else or for yourself, then something's wrong with your heart. So this could be a second thing that you could be doing is discipleship. Uh, and in Acts 14, it talks about the weak Christians versus the strong Christians. And specifically, it's basically talking about those who follow the law and then those who don't. The strong Christians are those who don't, who realize you don't have to follow the law. The weak Christians are the ones who think you do have to follow the law. Um, in Acts 14, I mean, it's just there plain as day. But sometimes it takes strong Christians who understand the gospel better to disciple others. So to have these kinds of conversations, and that's not so you can argue with this person you're trying to disciple. It's so that they can buy into it themselves. They can buy into the theology themselves because they thought through it themselves. They believe it because they think it's true, not because you told them it was true. And so that's pretty important is discipleship. Or the third purpose that's possible is salvation. Maybe you're talking to somebody because you think you just know that they need the gospel. They need to be saved. And it's just like Paul with the pagans, like we read just a second ago in Acts 16. He talked with those people, and people who were pagans and needed the gospel got saved because Paul talked with people with respect and love and kindness. He showed the fruit of the Spirit while he was having these conversations. All right. The third thing, realize when you're having these conversations that you're talking to a person. All right. You're talking to a person. Every person that you talk to, every person that you talk to has a background, has a story, and has a lot of different experiences that you don't have. All right. Every single person. And if somebody's background really determines, okay, where are their strengths going to be? Where are their weaknesses going to be? All right. Uh, but realize that you're talking to a person. So when somebody comes up to me and says, if God's so good, why does he allow evil? I'm going to say, well, what kind of evil has happened in your life? So that way I know exactly what's the background to this person. So what am I trying to answer here? Is it the theoretical question, or is it the an answer to actual events that have transpired in this person's life? But those events also shape the kind of person that you're talking to. Characteristics build through trials and tribulations and different things like that. So just realize that you're talking to a person with a background, with a story, with a soul. Every person you talk to has a soul that the devil would like to see in hell one day, and that Christ would like to see in eternity with him one day. Number 4, don't attack individuals, only attack their beliefs. We don't need to do I forget the English term for the, but we don't need to attack the person. We need to only talk about the beliefs, right? Now, oftentimes I've had to call out people a few times, say, "Hey, there's something wrong with you here, the way that you're handling this conversation. There's something going on with you that you need to work on." All right? That's necessary sometimes because people need to stop and realize that, hey, you are not about this conversation. You are immature, and you need to grow up before you can have these kinds of conversations. Some people need to hear that, but make sure you're doing that out of love. You're not doing it as like an attack. I don't want to go around calling people stupid, or immature or anything. I don't want to call people anything. But if people need to hear it, they need to hear it. But you got to remember, no, don't attack the person, attack the beliefs. And if you do that, you'll actually be even better off because then you'll actually get to what's important. You won't be so sidetracked with all this stuff that's not important. And you won't be so sidetracked trying to offend the person that you're trying to win over to Christ, or you're trying to disciple, or you're trying to seek truth with. In those three purposes we talked about just a second ago. Number 5, if you don't know the topic or you don't know the facts, keep your mouth shut. All right? Keep your mouth shut. So if somebody posts something about the charismatic gift ceasing, right? But you never studied anything about what the arguments are, what the scriptures say. If you don't know anything about the topic, about the charismatic gifts, like the gift of healing, the gift of prophecy, the gift of speaking in tongues, that kind of thing. If you don't know, anything about the topic, then keep your mouth shut. Now, here's another thing though, is I don't know. So me personally, I don't know everything about everything, all right? I mean, nobody does, right? So when you have those kinds of conversations, I especially like charismatic gifts, I just say, listen, this is what I believe, this is what I know at the time, but you got to really humble yourself to say, I could be wrong. I could be wrong. I mean, you should do that every single time. But if you don't know the topic, you got to be very humble when you do participate. All right? That doesn't mean don't let somebody just push you around, and don't let somebody who really should be humbling themselves down a little bit, don't let them just kind of bully you out of the conversation saying, I know more than you do. So when I was talking with the Jews, they always said, every single time, they said, you don't know Hebrew, so you can't tell us anything about the Old Testament. All right? They said that multiple times, and every time something in the Old Testament comes up that defends Christianity, they would say, "Oh, well, no, that's a mistranslation." Every single time, because they can do that because Hebrew words mean 15 different things sometimes. Uh, but they used to do that to me. But you see, I didn't. It's not. It's not that I said I know Hebrew. It's I did. But what I do know though is that I know people who know Hebrew, right? And I know people who know Hebrew that said this is the way that this verse is supposed to be translated. All right. And if I don't know how a verse is supposed to be translated, and I don't know anything about the Hebrew, then I have to admit that, right? I have to admit that. And sometimes I know why it's hard because sometimes when we admit something like that, it's humiliating sometimes to admit we don't know something. But I tell you what, though, if everybody admitted the stuff they didn't know, there would be no humiliation because we'd all be doing it. Because there's a lot of things people don't know about different topics and things. Uh, so if you don't know the topic, keep your mouth shut. Number six, don't just try and come up with a response. Think about the why. Think about why are they saying what they're saying. It's like I just said earlier. If I'm dealing with the problem of evil, I'm gonna figure out why is this person asking me about the problem of evil. Maybe their mom just died last week, and they're like, why did God take my mom so young, or something like that, or somebody's asking about the end times. Why is somebody so interested in the end times and the rapture? Is it because they're fearful? Are they excited? Or are they interested? I mean, what is it? And so really get into the why are they asking that, and oftentimes you'll see that people are asking why simply to attack or to cause problems. So if you sense that, you need to recognize that, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. Uh, we'll go ahead and talk about number seven. So when you're talking to somebody, maybe you realize that they aren't in the conversation. They're not there to learn and that kind of thing. If you're realizing that while you're in conversation with them, uh, you need to uh, so when you're online, so if you're online or like in debates, like so when professional debaters like Michael Licona, just listen to it again, but Michael Licona and Bart Ehrman have debated multiple times. And when they debate, they're really not trying to convince the other person. What they're doing is they're debating so that the people in the audience can hear what's going on and can soak in what's going on, and then the audience has a little more information on how to make their decision and what their beliefs are. And so when you're online specifically, think about that in the same way. So when I'm conversating with somebody who's calling me an idiot, calling me names, and all this stuff, for one, if you're doing that, focus on the arguments and not the insults, and brush the insults off and move on. Uh, but I know from multiple posts that I'm probably not going to convince the person I'm actually talking to, but I might just be able to convince or defend the person that's reading the comments, especially online on Facebook. A lot of people will just read the comments and they won't actually uh, participate, even sometimes. I've been in debates with people and they'll go through and they'll like my comments. I've also seen people do it against me to the person I'm debating with, but people who you wouldn't even think were paying attention would go through and like my comments. And so that way, and it's kind of reassurance for me that people are listening and reading what I have to say. And I'm reaching people who, not the person I'm really talking to, but the people who are reading the comments. And 90% of the time, those are the people you're really having the conversations with, anyways. Uh, Number eight, find modern people who are better at this than you to look up to. So follow famous apologists, follow famous theologians, and famous atheists. If you just watch a few online debates um, between professional, the premier scholars of the world. Uh, if you listen to some William Lane Craig or Frank Turek or Michael Licona, Bart Ehrman, listen to those guys. Bart Ehrman's not a Christian, but if you listen to those guys and you see how they handle themselves in conversation, and you'll also see many times that they shouldn't have acted like that, where they act childish or they're maybe not these guys as much, but a lot of people will just act childish and insulting during a debate and just talk about how stupid you are. Sam Harris did that a little bit with William Lane Craig and even encouraged a student that was asking a question to insult William Lane Craig, and but just listen to those kinds of guys and uh, you can really learn a lot from those guys. You can really learn a lot from those guys. And specifically, the one, and like I said, the one I just watched was a debate between Michael Licona and Bart Ehrman. You can find it on YouTube and you can find it on podcasts or whatever. They debated, are the Gospels historically reliable? But they really respected one another. And I was actually there. And if you watch the video on YouTube at the Q&A, the very last question that was asked was my friend Braden Stewart, and I was actually standing right behind him. So you'll see me on the video there about to ask my question, but didn't quite didn't get up there in time to ask. So, but it was a great debate, and I remember we were done. Bart Ehrman and Michael Licona got up, and two guys who literally just tore each other apart in a debate for the past hour and a half, or it was like 2 hours at that point. They got up, hugged each other, and went on about their lives. They did what they came to do, and that was to teach and to debate the topic for everyone that was in that room listening, and for all the people who watched online and that kind of thing too. Uh, but that was a wonderful debate, a wonderful experience just to see people like that. So find people like that that are used to it, and just see how they handle it. I always say, somebody asked me before, what would be the biggest thing that you take away from Bruton Parker College, and this was it. I had two main Christian studies professors, Dr. Billy Puckett and Dr. Jerry Ray. Those two guys were two of the smartest men I have ever met in my entire life. All right, that I've known personally like that. Okay, uh, two of the smartest men I've ever met, but they were the most humble. They were some of the most kindest. They were the kindest men I ever met. They really carried themselves well, especially Dr. Ray and Dr. Puckett. We'd have conversations in class all the time, and they both would be just so gracious and patient and kind as we were over here being, dumb, arrogant college kids. They would let us have these kinds of conversations and really respect us, and they respected anybody who disagreed with them. Not that they wouldn't lose their temper, not that they would lose their cool sometimes or whatever, but they respected people, and they were the most humble people you ever met. And they never thought that they were know-it-all, but they knew the stuff that they knew, and they stood up for the stuff that they knew and thought was right. But it was very interesting to see and just have those kinds of mentors in my life. And Austin Pounds is really good at being one who can have a conversation about various topics with people who disagrees with him and can still respect them. And I pray that as you see Austin and I continue to have those kinds of conversations like that, that you see mutual brotherly love while you watch that. All right, so let me just say this. My final thoughts. My final thoughts. If you're gonna have debates and you're gonna have topics and you're gonna have conversations, for one, I highly encourage it because you can learn, you can grow in your faith in Christ as you learn how to deal with people and as you learn those kinds of things, you can grow in your knowledge and your faith in Jesus Christ as you have those kinds of conversations, and you get out of your little echo chamber. Everybody likes to hear stuff. Everybody likes to be around people that agrees with them so they can kind of reaffirm something they already believe. But if you're not challenging yourself, I'm convinced that you really don't know if what you believe is true. So study these things, have these conversations, and get to know some people. Man, I've met some great people that disagree with me, and if I wouldn't have reached out to them, and if I wouldn't have talked to them about various topics, I don't know if we ever would have really had become friends. And so it's really beneficial, and you just never know the kinds of people you're reaching. I'm one. I haven't led a whole lot of people to Christ, but I've led enough for it to count. If you lead one to Christ, it's enough for it to count. So a lot of people will be led to Christ. I've strengthened. I know I've helped strengthen and been a part of the Spirit strengthening other Christian brothers and sisters, and just defending the faith and talking about theology and just getting to know a lot of this stuff. Uh, but I just leave you with this. Uh, know that you are imperfect. Know that the person you're talking about is imperfect. But then know that everybody is asking the same questions that you are. And that if you'll just have the conversations and you'll build yourself up with people and you'll strengthen, you'll challenge yourself, you can understand truth better. You can understand people better, and you can learn how to reach people with the gospel of Jesus Christ. And you can learn how to know the truth and how the truth will set you free. Thank you so much for watching, and God bless you in your journeys as you begin to have these conversations. You continue to have these conversations, and you keep these tips and ideas in your mind as you have these conversations. So go out there, defend the hope that is within you. Thank you so much for watching. God bless.
Thank you so much for watching the Grace Bond Ministries podcast or listening to the podcast. I know there's various ways that you could be listening to this right now or watching this right now. But I just want to say thank you so much. And if you would, wherever you're listening, if you're listening on YouTube, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Podcast, please leave a 5-star review and write a little thing there. If you're on Facebook, leave a comment. Let me know how this impacted you, or even any other questions or comments or concerns you may have. And also, if you have an idea or you have something you really want to talk more deeply about, you can always email me at gracebondministries@gmail.com. But thank you so much. Remember, for it is by grace you are saved through faith, and not of yourselves, for it is the gift of God. Thank you for listening to Grace Bond Ministries.